up if I haven't unmuted you appropriately. So thank you very much for joining. This is session 2.1 of the Collingwood Habitat and Towns conference, and it's local resource development for a sustainable future. People are looking attentively, but if you can hear me and you have your video on, can you wave just so I definitely know you can hear me? Okay, wonderful, thank you. So we have about 56 participants, and I was going to go through a few quick topics to introduce things. One is, what's this session about? Well, it's about local resources, and it's been split off from the other session, which is really about local financial resources and financing. And the session questions that were given to the speakers, just so the rest of us are aware, are things like what you think are or could be our sustainable resources, examples of town, local, or community-led programs or initiatives that help to harness sustainable urban resources, key challenges, how important this is this something we can let slide, or is this something that has to be at the forefront? And what are some of the policy or urban planning incentives that can be put into place by local authorities? Although we wouldn't limit questions or ideas to those topics, but those are the ones that the panelists themselves were provided. And what will the session be like? I will briefly introduce each speaker and panelist. If they don't think I do a good enough job, then they can certainly fill in a bit of bio themselves. Everyone will have 5 minutes to speak in the introductory portion. So I have a little sign here, which you might or might not see. Oh no, I might have to turn my background off. Oh well. If you see me waving, it says you have 1 minute left. It's intended that this session be interactive. So at the end, when the panel and the speakers are having a conversation, I'll work with them to try and give everyone a chance to speak. But as well, we'll keep an eye on the chat. So if you have questions for the panel, and I hope that you do, feel free to put them in the chat. And if you want them to go to a specific person, also please indicate that. Can't guarantee that we'll catch them all, or some might not go off the screen, but the idea is that you're getting as much as you can out of this session, and that your ideas are also being captured. So, and then what will happen next after the session? Krista Carter, who works here at the town of Collingwood, has volunteered to be the note taker for this session. So she and I will do a brief summary of the presentations and your input during the session. And as well, depending on what you say and what you put into the chat, we may also suggest edits for the resolutions, the conference resolutions. So that's another motivating factor for you to comment if you have things to say. And you'll be able to see those live at the link that Alex had sent out earlier today, to the live link that everyone received to the conference resolutions. So this session pulls together a lot of things I've been interested in within my life, being the daughter of a wildlife officer, a CIO of a conservation authority. So I have a deep appreciation of all the speakers. I was wowed by their bios, and I recognize a number of the attendees as well. So we're going to jump into this essential discussion, and the first of our speakers is Mr. Larry Law. He's the CEO and founder of the Living Water Resorts, and he was awarded a 2016 industry recognition for longstanding hospitality commitment for contribution to restaurants and supporting the Simcoe hospitality and tourism industry. He's fed hundreds of needy people in our community. He's a resident of Collingwood, and at least one of his business, maybe several of his businesses are here. He's donated over $100,000 to Georgian College and the library, and is an architect by training, built over 3,000 homes in Ontario, and as a very successful business person who has an eye on the broader community. So Mr. Law, please start your thoughts for us. 5 minutes. Just one moment, I'm sorry, I'm trying to unmute you. I think you're good.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Sonia, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to share a little bit of my 30 years of sustainable business journey with you in 5 minutes. Almost 30 years ago, I came to Collingwood to build houses in Cranberry Resort, which was under receivership. My goal was just to come make money. For the first 10 years, we almost went bankrupt, lost a lot of money, and my partners left me. And I have faith in Collingwood, which is like a jewel to be cultivated. Now I have been transformed to do business as a mission to serve people with a loving heart. The vision with a caring guiding principle attract God-sent good leaders. We build up a team with servant leadership style, which is to serve and then to lead. We all take business as a mission to build a platform to inspire others to do good deeds. We chose and we all continue to choose kindness over self-serving. We choose joy over negativity. We walk the talk according to what we promise. We don't have much of a company politics, but mutual respect of diversities. More we want to do good, more we recognize our limitation. We learn to be humble, to recognize that no one is big enough to do it all. As such, we are grateful to be in collaboration with the government events, many social organizations, and colleges for the betterment of the community, including the youth education, single mom support, homeless, mentally challenging one, mid-wage jobs, and entrepreneur and leadership development workshops, business as a mission workshop, and even we volunteer to serve globally in Cambodia, Kenya, Paraguay, and China. In return, we feel we have a bigger life, a fulfilling and a purpose-driven life. We're able to do so because our staff are all part of the contribution. We have established a caring company culture that the staff feel proud of the company's vision and be able to live out a work that is beyond working and making money, but making a positive impact in people's life and help making our community towards a more sustainable development. However, during the COVID-19, God really put us in trials. We had to lay off hundreds of the staff. Many live on paycheck to paycheck. By God's grace, I was able to top up the pays to 90% for 30 days before the government kicks in with some funding later on. We continue to care our staff by offering food basket and to other underprivileged locals in partnership with churches through our company chaplain. We were able to import KN95 masks from China to donate them to the local hospital as a community support. In a short meeting called by our mayor and a social organization, we worked out a safe place for the homeless people. I was among other community leaders in the task force to work on the economic recovery, including the affordable and sustainable housing. Under our mayor's undivided leadership, it shows good model leadership. It shows good interaction and partnership among local politicians, town staff, business, and community for the common good. When we build such a caring culture, investment will come, the job will be created. Our company now is back to business now, but we prove that we are having a much stronger and effective team because we have embraced a more appreciative bonding and trusting relationship among ourselves due to our action in love. As a man of faith, I really believe that the success of a sustainable future relies on human resources. People are all equal and can bring value to the world. It is our responsibility to build an environment to foster and inspire the people to jointly make a good sense of holistic, inclusive community of kindness, justice, honesty, and diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. That was wonderful and an awesome kickoff for things. And you were within 1 second of exactly 5 minutes. So you get the gold star for sure.
Thank you.
Is that picture behind you one of your own resorts?
Yes, right. Yes, Living Water Resort. Yeah.
Yeah, Living Waters Resort.
In Collingwood.
Okay. And now our next speaker is our second speaker, Mr. Daniel Corona. And hopefully I pronounced that correctly because Corona is very common right now. He is the president of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities, yes, and the mayor of the town of West Wendover. He's passionate about affordable housing, sustainability, healthcare, technology, and education. And he's currently the youngest person to ever hold office, as well as the youngest mayor in Nevada. And on top of that, I was noticing on LinkedIn that he's been the mayor for 3 years and 10 months since November 2016. So you're probably just a baby back then. But in any case, I'm going to turn it over to you to please provide your piece in 5 minutes or so.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. And yes, you did pronounce that correctly. I guess that's kind of the one benefit of COVID-19 is now everyone can pronounce my last name. I'm going to kind of keep my comments a little short. As Sonia mentioned, I was elected in 2016. At the time, I was 25 years old, the youngest person ever elected in the state of Nevada. And my platform really focused on economic diversification and trying to diversify West Wendover's economy. We're an economy that is very reliant upon the tourism industry. We are just a short drive from Salt Lake City, Utah. And so we have 5 million visitors a year predominantly from the Salt Lake City area coming out to West Wendover to gamble in our casinos and partake in those things that are legal in Nevada but not legal in Utah. And so a big focus of ours has been, how do we diversify our economy? And one of the things and solutions that we came up with was to build a downtown from the ground up. West Wendover is kind of a unique place in that we are a community that doesn't already have an existing urban core downtown center. And so this kind of provided us a unique opportunity to build that downtown from the ground up, to give a place for our small businesses to be centrally located, and then also to allow us to increase affordability in our housing stock. And so one of the ways that we're planning on doing that is through high density zoning. I think that one of the biggest things and one of the biggest drivers of climate change is urban sprawl. And so we want to be very mindful of, our natural surroundings and the natural resources. And so instead of really, putting even more stress upon those resources, we want to centralize housing, get a higher density, and really try to keep the cost, the housing costs down as well. And then also focusing on renewable energies to power our downtown. I'm sitting here in West Wendover City Hall, which is the first building in West Wendover that is powered primarily through solar power. And this is one of the newest buildings in town. It was built in 2008. And we envisioned that in our downtown, that much of that downtown urban core will be powered by renewables as well, so that we are not only being socially responsible with our approach to housing, but also environmentally responsible with the way in which we power that downtown. We also, water in the desert is a very sacred resource. That's another resource that we do not take for granted. A few years ago, there was a mine that opened up just on top of our water source, about 40 miles from our community. And they were looking to expand the mine underground, which would take them below the water table and into our water source. Luckily, working with them, we've addressed those issues and they've halted that plan for now until they can, working with the city and through their environmental folks on how they will be able to find a sustainable way in which to continue to mine the gold that they're after, but also protect our water source. Because anyone who knows Nevada knows that Nevada, there's constantly fights over water in the state of Nevada. And so the fact that we are able to have our own aquifer just, 40 miles down the road outside of the community is something that we hold dearly and we want to protect. And so, we really take our partnership with the mining industry and business partners very seriously and making sure that everyone is doing their part to protect that, very sacred resource and protecting water for generations to come. One last thing I want to note is the project that we're working on right now. About 6 months ago, we had a local student come before the city council with an idea to plant 1,000 trees in our community to help reverse the effects of climate change and hopefully make us a carbon neutral community. And so far, he's planted 400 trees. I think he's planning on planting his 500 tree this month. And so, we're all trying to do our part. The community really is rallying behind a sustainable future, and we're getting the youth involved. And I think that those, that youth resource is a huge resource because they're going to be here long after we all are gone, and they're going to have to steward this land. So I'll leave it at that, but it's an honor to be here with you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And it's interesting sitting here in Collingwood, hearing you talk about water only 40 miles down the road, when I think if I could just walk 5 feet forward and look out the window and there would be a Great Lake. We all have different challenges. The next speaker is Mr. Kamran Hazani. He's the Executive Director of the Urban Economy Forum. He has a lot of academic knowledge and is a professor at CDI College and has comprehensive experience, particularly in networking and databases. So we're looking forward to hearing about this from a technology perspective and maybe an urban economy perspective. Welcome.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. After creating the project for supporting SDGs goals based on the UN Habitat structure and indexes, we need managing and monitoring all the projects and specific reports for enhancing, which means we need a systematic approach to urban management at the town level for realizing sustainable development goals. We believe the scale of towns and small cities is reachable for realizing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Urban resources are more independent of public participation. If we created systematic approach for town leaderships based on an assessment and management systems for project, the leadership based on the assessment and the management systems for project, then we can explore and obtain more resource for the development of town programs. In this approach, we can access step by step the impact of projects by leveraging measurement tools, enhancing information, and ultimately producing reports for local authority and central, provincial, and national governments. An international platform for town leaders will involve identify specific indicators based on CPI index for for different towns around the world and creating a measurement platform to begin the global dialogue on sustainable urbanism. Urban Economy Forum wants to create an SDG dashboard for aligning the sustainable development goals that will be used index to show the progress of the SDG from the scale of small cities and towns. This online interactive dashboard will collect information, assess and monitor urban resource and financial opportunities, among other indicators. We will need to create a decision support systems layer for executive information systems. What for? For supporting the managing all the project within the data systems and establishing reliable communication between the all towns and cities, which is part of the SDGs plan. In this situation, which means all the cities or towns, they're going to be one site, and the site can communicate together and communicate with the central location and transfer the information based on the designing we have. From the design, from a design perspective, we will also need to implement the cloud-based technology systems. This system will enable us for create two specific things. First things is a PPM, portfolio project management, because all the CD and site, everything, they have a specific project, based on the SDGs goals and everything. The second thing, develop a specific web application or dashboard for managing and measuring and monitoring SDG in each city and town. In fact, with the structure of the design, we can create a BI systems on top of all the web applications and software for creating and customizing our reports made, which will be needed for monitoring and measuring all SDGs index. That means we need to create an integrated SDG management systems. This is like exactly the total systems. That total systems support everything from A to Z, which means all the information comes from the project and all index and support based on the dashboard and creating report. That report going to be used for the everywhere. And you can see the progress. To some, this is a progressive international platform of town leaders who will work together to create this global network for the future based on the structure that is being developed by the Urban Economy Forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. That put us in a good frame of mind for thinking about that, the ways to understand data. Appreciate that, yeah. That input.
Thank you.
And also perfectly on 5 minutes. Someone's done a lot of practicing. 4 people have done a lot of practicing. There's one short announcement just before we get into the panelist presentations. Ray Orb and Isa Kabir Mohammed. They were looking for you in the breakout room. So that means you would go to the bottom of your screen, likely the bottom to the red leave button, and it should give you an option to join a breakout room where they're discussing the financial side of financial resources for towns topics. Ray Orb and Isa Kabir. Thank you. Okay, and so now we're going to get into our panel. And so there's the first person up is Vasant Shenoy, Director of Global Cities. And I don't see Vasant. Maybe you don't have your video on. But maybe you could turn your video on and wave, and then I'll know who you are to unmute you. Vasant Shenoy, Director of Global Cities. Okay, so I'm going to skip him for the moment, just because I can't see him. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to move on to our second speaker and try to come back to Vass. Our second speaker is Gordon Barnhart. He is, and I'll just unmute you, Gordon. There we go. He is the president of the Municipalities of Saskatchewan. And he's had extensive experience in government, including 20 years as the clerk of the Saskatchewan legislature and 5 years as the clerk of the Canadian Senate. So I can imagine that you've had some conversations with lawyers over procedure, and maybe you've advised lawyers over procedure. And in 2007, Gordon was named one of the University of Saskatchewan's 100 Alumni of Influence. And in 2013, he was awarded the Peter Lougheed's Award for Leadership in Public Policy. So Mr. Barnhart, we're looking forward to your thoughts on town level resources.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and good afternoon, everyone. I enjoyed a very early lunch today because of the time zone change. I decided to eat when everyone else was eating on Eastern Standard Time. And so I'm happy to now be joining the group. As Sonia said, I'm president of the Municipalities of Saskatchewan. We represent 440 urban municipalities, which means the cities, the towns, the villages, resort villages, and northern communities across our province. I represent my own community of Saltcoats. I'm councillor, and we'll pilot this. It's a town of 500 people. And when I was during the break, saw a video about India talking about a small town of 500,000 people. We're a small town of 500,000 people. But as the mayor once said to me, he said, Gordon, between you and a city, the only difference is the number of zeros in your budget. The problems are the same, and you have to find similar ways of coping. I'm very pleased to be participating in this sustainable topic because our convention theme last February was building sustainable hometowns. And so we as an organization discussed best practices and best ways of sustaining our communities. Sustainability is often used with the word green. To be sustainable, you have to have environmental programs and that sort of thing. And I would agree with that, except to say sustainability to me means so much more. It's really trying to make sure that we're providing services to our citizens, the services they need, so that they can have the best quality of life. So the one area that I wanted to emphasize for my hometown of Saltcoats, but this applies really to most of our membership, is safe water, drinking water, and environmental disposal of wastewater. Interestingly enough, in Saskatchewan, pretty well all of the towns and villages put their sewer and water systems in about 55 years ago. We're a young province and a new province, and that was when the systems went in, which if you're very well aware of the machinery involved, that means that they are now needing to be upgraded and replaced at a huge cost to the municipality. We do have across Canada an infrastructure, and my community got a $4.2 million grant under that program for sewer and water. But it still means that we had to raise about $1.4 million for our share of that. And so it is a huge expenditure for us on our small scale. And so it needs some cooperation, working together, and making sure that we are trying our very best to have good sewer and water, because that is how our town will be sustainable. And those are the challenges that I think many of our communities are facing. We are also facing demands for more infrastructure, and it seems that the demands from people are getting ever more. They want better sidewalks, they want better paving, they need sewer and water, we're in a big process right now of closing landfills. And so the municipalities are saying we're having to do more with less, because government, our provincial government, is downloading many of the programs that used to be provided by the province are now being downloaded to the municipality. And so those are some of the challenges, but I think that urban government in Saskatchewan is alive and well. I think that our organization is representing their interests, and we are giving them encouragement to work together to become hubs of innovation so that we can meet the challenges that we're facing and that we will have sustainable communities into the future. Thank you very much, Sonia.
Thank you very much, Gordon. That was an interesting overview, and I'm just still in my mind dividing 500 people into 1.2 million of investment, and it comes up to a big number, especially considering that's 500 people, not 500 families. So, better keep that piggy bank out.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we did receive a note that Vasant was unable to join, and I did neglect to say earlier that Dimitri from Greece also had something come up today, so he was unable to join. He was with the Greek Association of Municipalities. So I'm going to move on now to the second panelist. The panelist is Ms. Julia Deans. She's the president of Habitat for Humanity Canada, the founding CEO of the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation. And she built a Canada-wide network in that role and helped more than 12,000 18 to 39-year-olds launch businesses across Canada with her coaching. She's led a team of 95 staff and hundreds of partners in 15 locations across Canada in growing the annual number of startups financed by startups, and 43% of those were women-led, which is right in line with the goals of this conference as well. Julia, over to you.
Thank you, and hello everybody. I thought you might like some pictures, so I do have a little presentation, but I'm not sure if anybody's here to display it for us. If Evan's on this line, you may kick that in at any time, but otherwise I'll just get started. It's a pleasure to be with you all and see many old friends and new from around the world. I'm with Habitat for Humanity Canada. Habitat for Humanity works in 70 countries around the world to help low-income families build strength and self-reliance and stability through affordable home ownership. We see this as a very exciting time for towns. The growing unaffordability and congestion of our large urban centers has already made towns an attractive option for many, including retirees. But this crisis has now made towns an even more attractive option, and one that is a viable option for working people who no longer have to be tied to city offices. Things like water, natural beauty, and cultural activities are all going to be important attractors for towns, but there is one thing that will make towns successful, and that is people. People create ideas, people create communities, but they cannot do all of those things if they don't have a safe and affordable place to live. And at Habitat for Humanity, we see firsthand what a huge difference it makes for a family to have a place they can call home. And we do believe that strong and stable homes help build strong and stable communities. Looking at my next slide, it just gives you a sense of, from our experience of Habitat families, what the benefits are for families that have safe and affordable housing. And it really allows them to fully flourish and contribute to their communities. This gives you an idea of just some of the benefits: better housing, better jobs, more self-reliance, and more education. Having safe and affordable homes also improves the overall well-being of a family. And if we switch to the next slide, you'll see some of the statistics that we found. Happiness, family life, health, and the success and integration of people's children. These are all things that come from having a safe and affordable place to live. And clearly, people who have these things in their lives are the people we all want in our towns. people who are achieving their potential and able to build the social and economic success of their communities. By investing in housing, we are investing in bricks and mortar, but we're also investing in the families and communities we need. All orders of government must invest in housing. And I'm going to use the rest of my time to note 5 tools I think towns have an opportunity to use to boost their people resources through affordable housing. The first is to create an affordable housing strategy, one that reflects the needs of your town or your community. I'll give you the example of Northumberland County, an area of Ontario, where there's a regional housing plan and 7 individual plans for the 7 individual towns that are each quite distinct. The second tool is to create access to land that is affordable. This could include differentiating property taxes and development fees that help homes stay perpetually affordable. It could include freeing up government lands that are surplus. And in this time of COVID, we know there are going to be bricks and mortar, retail, empty buildings, parking lots, all places that could be used for affordable housing. The third tool is to look at revising your building and zoning regulations to encourage and accelerate affordable housing. You can incent the construction industry to innovate to meet needs that you have around sustainable building and some of the things that we've been talking about earlier. Build homes that are close to transportation and education, services, and food. The final tool, and probably the biggest, is to leverage your people and leverage the community agencies and volunteers that exist. Partner with community organizations like Habitat to harness the incredible volunteer skills, time, money, and knowledge that come from retirees, but also from your youth, as Daniel said, from all the people in your community. Many towns rely on retirees and other volunteers to run big events and to do things like determine a community response to COVID. It's also a way to meet other goals. For example, in Ontario, a study showed that looking at old age friendly communities, that you can, by involving your seniors, you improve the outcomes for them and you improve your performance on the SDGs. I think that volunteers can also leverage your other resources, be they tourism, be they water protection, be they cultural assets. So I will leave it there just with this, a series of tools that I hope that you'll consider including in your toolkit. And my last slide, just my final thought, is towns need people and people need housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting. The towns need people and people need housing, and it's a symbiotic, perfect timing, by the way. It's that symbiotic relationship that is very, very important, and a challenge for many towns, including Collingwood. So we're right on time to be moving into the interactive portion of this, which would be the panel discussion. And by that, I think that we should have all of our panelists available to, our speakers and panelists available to answer the questions. So if it's okay with them, I'm going to actually unmute each of you. If you'd like to stay muted, let me know, but otherwise it takes a second to unmute you. So I'm unmuting Larry, Daniel, Kassam, Gordon, there you are, and Julie has already unmuted. So we had a number of questions that were put forward, and we do invite anyone that's participating to also put questions in the chat. And one of the questions so far is a transactional one. Will the host be able to share the PowerPoint with us for our notes? And if that would be okay with you, Ms. Deans? Okay, we'll make sure that happens. All right, so I'll kick off with an easy question maybe. We heard from our speakers, and I think we heard that the resources that they're valuing or highlighted today were people, including volunteers, so our human resources, our water, both in getting it for drinking and treating it once we've used it. We value our youth resources, our trees and their contribution to climate change. We value homes and we value land as resources. So from the speaker and panel's perspective, are those the main things that you're concentrating on when you think of the resources that we need as a network of towns to really value? And if you could just, as a speaker, briefly put up your hand, that way I can just keep the traffic moving and keep people in order. Mr. Barnhart.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And I want to react to what Julia said in terms of volunteers, because coming from a small community and representing many small communities, this is vital for us. It's a capital V volunteer. An example, this last year we had some parents come before council saying, we have 75 young people wanting to play ball. Our ball diamonds are in need of repair, new backstops, new bleachers. And the town then put up $30,000 of line of credit because these parents were going to do all of this renovation. They created 3 brand new ball diamonds, new bleachers, new nets, everything, new bases. They didn't even tap into the $30,000 line of credit, but instead they raised more than that to pay for it. So it was such a nice ballpark that it was chosen for the provincial playoffs of baseball last year. Again for this year, except COVID came and they couldn't use the ballpark this year. But it just, and when it was all done, I asked the parents, you said you had 75, how many turned up? 75. So that shows what can be done with parents, with their kids. So that's youth, volunteers, working together to create a first-class ballpark and creating sports activities for the young people. One more quick thought. We also have the Autumn Summit, which is over 1,000 young people come to a small town like this, and it's a cross-country race, and it's been going for 20-some years. It's always in October, but again, it's put on by volunteers, and it involves youth. So, Julia, thank you for your presentation because it's stimulated some thoughts in my mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's definitely another check mark in our people, and our volunteers are one of our greatest resources. Anyone else that wants to comment on, from the panel and the speakers, that wants to comment on our urban resources and the types of resources that towns should be fostering and valuing?
Well, just chiming in, I'm thinking of 2 really neat examples. One from Daniel's country, the U.S., Detroit, not a small town, big city, and Hamilton, Ontario, a smaller city here. But the model, I think, works, which, to your point, Gordon, about young people. And Detroit was a motor powerhouse, big, powerful downtown with all kinds of office buildings, hit ruin, had lots of vacant lots, and young people came along and turned them into urban farms. And just sort of saying, we're going to make the community we want to live in, and completely transformed things in that city. In Hamilton, similar, steel town, a lot of parts of the town had become ones you didn't go to. And some of the young entrepreneurs I worked with in my previous role were setting up in Hamilton, and they said, we don't really care about that industrial past. We want to create a community that we can live in and have businesses and families in, and make the kind of community we want. And to their credit, the town elders, all the Board of Trade people said, over to you. We just can't, we don't have the answers, but we're going to make the spaces and give up the spaces for you to create and innovate. And they did. And I think that goes for any community, small or big, and it's a pretty inspiring set of examples.
I guess when we talk about people, and I think the people, we should also to be inspiring the people to take responsibility on an all individual basis, and everyone can be a leader. So we're talking about a model leadership. We just have to walk the talk. Sure, there's a lot of good ideas and so, but they all need to be carried out, by people. And if a good, humble, and leaders who is honest, who has integrity, who can inspire so many people to join in. So I think it's everything coming back to the people, and people of integrity and goodwill.
I'll jump in. I think kind of just to chime in on what everyone else is saying, I think especially as community leaders, it's important that we foster our young people's ideas and allow them to have space to flourish. You know, as I mentioned in my presentation, that the young person who came before the city council and wanted to plant 400 trees, you know, just those simple things that show our young folks that, you know, you have valid ideas and you know, it's your future. And so we're going to listen to you and we're going to work with you and make sure that those goals that you have or those projects that you want to do, that we're here to work with you. That same young person, he just came to me a couple weeks ago with an idea to start a community garden and try to get the young kids in the schools learning about gardening through that community garden. And I think, you know, that's another outside the box. We're in the desert, not a lot grows here, but if we can find what does grow and teach the kids about those native fruits and vegetables and teach them, you know, how it works and how our ecosystem works, I think that's things that we definitely should be fostering.
Interesting pieces there with land and youth being highlighted and human resources and mixed in those last three comments as well. One big challenge that I see here and I'd like to put on the table for the panelists is often people with alternate views to sustainability or to sustainable resources will say things like, we need to invest in business because it's only through business making taxes that we have something left over to do these other things. And I perceive that some of the discussion we're having today is a little bit around maybe turning the table a little bit the other way. If we don't keep our sustainability and our clean water and our water supply and other things, we might not be able to support business. But I'm wondering if people want to talk a bit about, you know, whether that is a challenge and how they've overcome it.
I'll start. One of the things here in Nevada, in 2019, our state legislature passed renewable portfolio standards that will increase, I think previously it was 25% by 2030, to now it's 50% by 2030. And the way that they plan to get there is through incentives for renewable industries to come into Nevada, produce solar and wind, as well as there are parts of Nevada that are very geothermally active. And so giving incentives to those businesses to locate in a state like Nevada, especially solar. I know, you know, Florida is the sunshine state, but there are places in Nevada that have sun almost year round. So we really could be a place, if we are willing to give those businesses the incentives to locate in our state, that could really flourish when it comes to those renewable industries. And I think it's something at the state level that they take very seriously. And I know several of our municipalities take it seriously as well, as we look towards alternate industries for our communities, that the renewable industries are kind of the path to the future, I think.
I would say the business is a sort of like the holistic thing. There's no one rocket science theory, but all in all, it's about the holistic lifestyle. And someone talking about the good quality of life. But good quality of life also happening in the company too. We do know that many people, they don't quit the company, they quit the manager. So going back is still be the caring culture. And so in that sense though, if we treasure the people's value and we work with them, and I think we would attract a lot of good people that way. And the more important thing is about after all though, after you make the first living or something, the people is not going to be satisfied, just keep on doing the same thing. So the higher purpose of being good is very, very, you know, inspiring. So it's up to the company to think beyond the box and not only to just do something what I need to do. Is going to be human, to be sensitive to the customer, to be sensitive to the community, to sensitive to the staff. As such though, we can do a lot of things because we have one common goal.
And and I would add, if you focus too much on business, you may lose sight of some other things like people. And I don't know if there's anybody on the session from Prince Edward County, another part of Ontario, wildly successful for tourism, wine, retirement living, and there's no housing for the service workers and the people who support it all. And most of them are commuting from far away, and there's not a lot of fixes there, but the business is great, but the thing that fuels the business is problematic for them. So losing sight of people and where they're going to live and how they're going to live can be the downfall of business too, or at least a limiter. But love to hear if there's anybody here from that community or others that are facing that kind of issue.
So we'll see if anyone self-identifies from Prince Edward County or another spot. You could just type into the chat or put your hand up, and I'll try to watch for that. And while that question is out there, Tatiana Marchenko, I think I got that right, had brought up a suggestion that's gotten a few comments about office towers and abandoned big box stores being repurposed for housing, as we have available spaces and a housing crisis. So I don't know if anyone wanted to further comment on that suggestion. No? Okay, well, there's a few people had written right in the chat saying, let's do it. I think where there's a need and there's a space, we could move on to that. And there was another piece from Julie Scarsala. Hi, Julie. Hope I said your last name correctly. I always call you Julie. Policy is a key to drive change, especially for renewables. And Julie's been I guess a professional and a proponent for policy and renewable building materials and green policies for a long time with their own consulting firm in that field. I don't know if you wanted to say a couple sentences to see if the panel would like to react to your thought.
I applaud Daniel for the positioning that you put Nevada for driving the renewable energy policies. I know the whole state of California has been a real forward-thinking state to really drive an uptake and the incentivizing for the industries. So I think there's lessons to be learned and best practices that we can learn from you and many others for renewables. I know the town of Blue Mountains is looking at a renewable energy plan right now as part of the subcommittee work, and they're head down trying to work that through. But definitely I think the best practices, both again going global to local, is critical. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. And Rob Voigt has put in the chat that the housing crisis is not an either-or between government and business. This is a need for both, bringing whatever they can to the challenge. And Mr. Law and Daniel, maybe others, so Julia are all nodding that there's partnerships available here. One of the things that's a challenge in Collingwood, and we often think about when we think about resources, is of course the green side. And Daniel touched on it a little bit with his youth suggestion of 1,000 trees. And if you're in Ontario, which I recognize many people may not be, there was a new planning thrust requirement that people set out core green areas and linkages between those core green areas. And I'm wondering what people think of as the role of towns in protecting these green or wild spaces, whether they be for people's use or simply to be left as green space through communities. It can be quite a large investment, especially as towns start to grow. Any thoughts on the commitment or requirements of towns in this sphere?
If I can, as I mentioned earlier, West Wendover is building a downtown from the ground up, and that's something that we've talked a lot about in our plans for that, is providing those dedicated green spaces, but recognizing that we are in the desert, and so we need to use water smart plants. But I think no matter where you're at, it's something that a municipality can certainly do, and set aside land for. The 1,000 trees that the student wanted to plant, we have dedicated a part of the future downtown for him to plant those trees. So right now, that plot is just a plot of desert, nothing else there, but he's planted so far, I think about 400 water smart trees that are natural to the area. And so, that's something definitely that I think municipalities can and should do, because it's important for the future of our environment.
Thank you very much. We've had a specific question from Colleen Isherwood. Colleen Isherwood? Hope I said that correctly, Colleen. Okay, good. Yeah, she's smiling. So it's for Larry. And she says, what is the most important thing hotels and resorts can do to help communities become sustainable, not just in Collingwood, but in other communities?
Well, I guess coming back to about the higher purpose, I would like to point out upon that doing business, it can be both. It can be profitable. At the same time, it can be also doing good. And doing something, other than the local community, also enrich our life. And because no matter what, though the world is so small, we learn to respect other people in other countries. And so by having some connection and support in somewhere else, could be a very good way to enhance our life. In that sense, though, it also becoming a better person. A better person is not just to want to do it, but you need to take time to humble yourself and knowing that you cannot do things all. So in that sense, though, and I think it's a culture. It takes time and years to get to that stage.
Thank you, Larry. Does anybody else want to talk to that item? Oh, sorry, Julia, I think I almost cut you off there.
No, I think what I love is this there's a recurring theme of partnership, whether it's governments partnering with their people or with business, et cetera. And clearly no one actor has a monopoly on this. I'm thinking, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about the exchange between different levels of or orders of government. And in this hopefully recovery stage, we have the opportunity to drive a much greater sustainability agenda, but I'm assuming towns are going to be relying a lot on funding from other orders of government. And I'd love to hear how that's manifesting itself in your thinking at the town level, and whether there are opportunities for towns to be working through how that can bubble its way up to try and support that kind of work that you want to do at the town level.
That's a great question, and I'm wondering if Mr. Barnhart, Gordon, has any thinking on that one, given that you've been working in other levels of government.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sonia, and I'm glad, Julia, that you raised that. You and I are thinking along the same line on many things today, so that's a great partnership. I raised earlier some of the problems facing towns and the costs involved. One of the ways that we're trying to cope with that is regional partnerships. And it can be, I can think of an example in Southwest Saskatchewan. And Daniel, you talk about desert. We have desert in that part of our Saskatchewan as well, very sparsely populated. But we have a small town really struggling, and the two rural municipalities around it joined in, and they took on a third of the cost of the recreational facilities, a third of the cost of operating the town. And you could say, well, why would those taxpayers want to help that town? And they said, because we want to make sure that town survives. because I don't want to have to drive 150 kilometers to go and get a tank of gasoline. I want to be able to go to my hometown to do that. And they pooled, the two RMs pooled $800,000 to build a water park recreation facility. It's beautiful, and yet it was all paid for by the surrounding communities, the surrounding municipalities. So regional cooperation is what's necessary. Saskatchewan, we have, I think, per population, the most municipalities of anywhere in Canada. For a little over 1 million people, we have 774 municipalities. We have to start to get them to join together in municipal districts, and certainly with regional cooperation. For some people, that's heresy, and they just run for the door with the hair on fire, just saying, that's terrible, you're taking away our independence. We have to take away the competitiveness of these communities so that, well, if you have a new rink, we have to have a new rink. Two towns 10 miles apart, 10 kilometers apart, don't have to both have first of the rate rinks. Why not share that facility? You get the rink and we'll get a new fire hall. And in my community, we now have, I think it's about 10 communities, and we are sharing costs for fire suppression, not only for buildings, but for prairie fires and those sorts of things. And this is a way that we can make our taxpayers' dollar go that much farther, is by sharing regional cooperation and ultimately cutting back on the number of municipalities we have.
Thank you very much. That was pretty insightful, and probably applies in many spots. We had another comment online from Mark Shivanidi about COVID has driven a stronger movement toward partnerships between public and private sectors, somewhat in line with the comment Rob Hoyt had made a little earlier. There is, at the end of this, I'll be making some suggestions based on what you've told me toward the World Summit resolutions. So there's about 6 or 7 of them that were potentially assigned to this discussion. And I'm going to tell you in 6 words or less for each what they currently are. Local authority accountability, being responsive and transparent. A civic economy with a socially responsible framework for local economic development. Cultural diversity and heritage, and preserving it and partnering with local communities on that. A proactive approach to climate adaptation with national governments and others. Sustainable housing, which I think is the first one that we've had much discussion on so far in our interactive portion and the presentations. The second last one is interaction between local authorities and the business communities, and we've had quite a bit of conversation on that as well. And the finally is the role of business to help grow a caring community, and we've talked about that one, I believe. So I didn't know if anyone wanted to comment on a few that I mentioned: local authority accountability, civic economy, cultural diversity, or proactive climate adaptation as something that's important to you, or are those things that are maybe falling behind the other things that we'd already discussed as far as immediate priorities?
Sonia, I'm taking up too much time perhaps, but you raised the transparency and accountability, and this is a really important topic for my way of thinking. As a counselor, I am conscious every day that I am spending taxpayers' dollars, and we have to be open to them as to how we're collecting our money, how we're spending their money on good projects. We show that we've tendered public works projects, for example. And I know that I have a few members within our organization that say, well, we don't have to tell the public that. We don't want to share the minutes or the financials because they're going to ask questions of us. And my response is, darn right they should, because you're spending taxpayers' money. So I would really put a lot of emphasis on that accountability, openness, transparency.
And Sonia, if I could just piggyback on what Gordon just said, transparency is huge. I mean, we are spending taxpayer dollars, and we need to be able to show that we're doing projects not for the sake of doing projects, but because they have a meaningful impact in our community. One example that I can think of just recently here in Nevada, the state just dispersed some of the CARES Act money that we received from the federal government to help combat the COVID-19 crisis. And the Nevada League of Cities had a member decide that they wanted to use a rather large portion of their funding that they received to go in and remodel a lobby in City Hall. And rightfully so, people were angered by this, and the mayor had to intervene and say, we're going to use this for something else instead. And it wasn't a good look for that city, especially when communities just down the street from them were using similar funds for rental assistance. And so we all need to be mindful about the way that we're spending taxpayer dollars, especially in light of the COVID-19 crisis, because I think there's it's even more hyper-focused, and folks are really paying attention. We need to do so responsibly.
And we have Rob Voigt, who's indicated he'd like to make some comments. So Rob, you should be able to speak there now.
Yeah, it's particularly those last points that were made about, how COVID has really highlighted the need for this, right? As I said in my presentation earlier, one thing I think we need to look at is that we do need to shift our expectations, those of us that are in governance, on how we're providing services to the public, in the sense, particularly if we look at the built environment. What we've seen with COVID is that our excessive focus on, in broad brush terms, here in North America, on auto-oriented public realm, which takes up the vast majority of the lands that municipalities own, which is the roadways. We learned very quickly that by having very narrow sidewalks, very wide roadways, excessive auto-oriented infrastructure, that didn't help us and isn't helping us through this crisis. It's showing that the public realm has been co-opted essentially for car movement and car storage, and it can be so much more. Those places where in the past, in very recent history, when people were asking, can we expand our sidewalks to have more human-oriented and scaled environments, we were told there's no money for it, the engineering won't support it, it won't be safe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet COVID has proven that those were all excuses. Because in many instances now, communities were quick to adopt approaches that adapted their public realm so they could have more areas for people to get outside and be able to still social distance, but use primarily the downtowns and those kinds of areas in a different way. So it proved that the public realm can work differently. It's the biggest asset and the most costly asset that municipalities have, and it needs to do more than just this kind of single-use approach that we have. And it proved that the only thing was missing to get those things done in the past was the political will, because the money's there. These places are still safe. In fact, they're doing more for the community than they ever have. It's unfortunate that it took this kind of experience to get us to that point. And that goes with our park systems and everything. We need park systems that are addressing people's needs throughout their entire life courses. Where are the places for people, particularly in slightly more urbanized towns, those folks that have mobility issues, right? Where can they go to safely social distance right now outside, right? Where are those contemplative spaces? Our parks are basically either trails or playing fields. It needs to be more diverse. We need to address people's needs first and foremost. all the other stuff will kind of sort itself out if we change our perspective that way, I would argue.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. I'll make a comment and probably not let Rob respond to it other than maybe nodding right now. But one of the company's businesses, Rob works for a private development company, and one of the businesses, if I characterize it properly, is land lease homes, where the company provides the long-term sort of green space and infrastructure, and people buy more affordable homes where they lease it for the rest of their lives, which is an interesting take on sustainable housing. So hopefully if I characterize that properly, you can nod.
Yeah, it's part of the missing middle. Yeah.
The missing middle. Thank you. Cameron hasn't spoken much from our panel's perspective as we went through these questions, and I'm wondering, Cameron, given your affinity with data and understanding insights, if anything that's come up over the discussion, you'd like to fill in any holes for us?
Oh yeah, because all the things I'll explain it here, or we have about the reports, dashboard, everything's. We focus on the one things. How's the effectiveness of the performance, effectiveness of the everything, effectiveness a combination of the quality of the service, performance of the service, and availability. All the data we have here, right now, they're based on the SDGs, goals and everything. They're gonna come based on the project, comes inside the systems, and the systems provide that data inside the specific dashboard, but we have a report. What's the purpose of this report? This report, exactly when I mentioned the DSS layer, helped all the level of the management or employee inside the systems for make a decision, which means we try to create good MCDM systems, multiple criteria decision-making for all the level who has a permission for that one. Depends on the level of the people that have the permission, which means all information we have, they show us how the progress of all the project and SDG goals, and then help the people who works with the government or everywhere for make a correct decision exactly based on the existing situation. Which means everything is just in time. Why gonna be is a web application? Why is it cloud-based right now? Because we need to integrate everything together. Right, talking like this is easy, but we need to create infrastructure. Right now, everything is available. Microsoft, Google, we're working right now, SharePoint server. We can create a PPM exactly based on the project. This project report comes in the systems and show us the specific things and enable the management, like a Sonia, to create a specific report, customize the report based on the meeting. This means she's gonna go in the meeting, no concern about the data and information. Based on everything, she has access for everything. That's this exactly situation. She can make a correct decision and very fast. This is a big gap between those informations. Right now, we're starting to calculate and estimate the information. After 1 month report comes, all the situation is different, which means this not reliable information for make a decision completely based on the system we have. Which means just my point always is watch the effectiveness, availability, quality, and performance. If you multiply together, you can see that your systems works or not.
Thank you very much. I wish I did have all that information at my fingertips in almost real time. It would be wonderful. We could give council great advice. I do see in the chat that there's been some comments about an author or insight person, Don Shoup, and it seems like municipal officials should have it as required reading, so maybe I'll have to read that now, some of those pieces now. We're just about, we have time maybe for one other mini discussion. And I wanted potentially to mention the item of civic economy. And it says here that we should have a socially responsible framework for local economic development. Collaborative, social, and circular economies with decent jobs, more opportunities for women and young people, and developing countries support the transition from informal to formal economy as necessary. And I'm wondering in particular the items of circular economies and creating decent jobs, massively important items in Collingwood, and I think regardless across many continents that those could both be very important. Does a panel have any thoughts with respect to our resources on social and circular economies and creating decent jobs? Daniel?
So I think that it's really about thinking outside the box when it comes to industries that would work well in your community. For example, I'm in Nevada, where in 2016 voters voted to legalize cannabis for recreational sale and use. And that was something that the city of West Wendover in late 2018, we jumped on that bandwagon. And because of that, we created 50 good paying jobs that offered benefits starting day one. And as that cannabis industry expands in West Wendover to now going into the grow and production of cannabis, we have 2 large-scale cannabis grow centers that are slated for the next couple of years that would each provide 80 new jobs, 80 plus new jobs, and they all pay over $15 an hour starting out. So, just kind of looking at what industries are emerging wherever you are, and figuring out a way that you can adapt and tap into those resources for your community. It really has made a difference here in West Wendover. Like I said, 50 jobs that we didn't have pre-2018 that we now had, and through COVID-19, although the dispensary was closed for a time, that business still valued their employees enough to pay them through the duration of the shutdown. And that was our only business that paid their employees through the entirety of the COVID-19 shutdown. And so, there were folks that had concerns and fought us against this, but in the end, it's showing to have paid off, as they've been a good partner and have really taken care of their employees.
Thank you, Daniel. Anyone else want to comment on that topic? Okay, we did have an interesting comment or two on one theme in the chat, which is about Parking Day. Titania Marchenko has noted it's a great opportunity to explore how paved spaces could be put to better use. As a student, we put in enough coins in a parking meter and turned a parking spot into a library. So I think that was along the lines of municipalities' greatest land holdings being places to park and ride your car, as opposed to people scaled. So that was an interesting item. Parking Day events. And Cameron had mentioned another comment about his an ERP system based on the needs for local government's operations and decisions. And Mr. Voigt has talked about planning regulations and town staff needing to be less prescriptive and out of date to help support economic development. And I think that's in the line with a number of comments that were made about how fast we really were able to move when COVID was on the table. So before I do a really very brief sum up, because we will end in 2 minutes or so at 3 o'clock, is there anyone either on the chat or the folks who are unmuted from our panel and speakers who wanted to have the last word? Is there something that you've been dying to say and you haven't had a chance to say it? This would be the perfect time. Get that on the record. Okay, so then the whirlwind summary starts with We talked about a number of sustainable urban resources, and the ones that we emphasized included people and volunteers, water, youth, trees and green, homes, land, and I think data did come up as we continued to speak. We talked about a holistic lifestyle with business not separate from business not being separate from doing the right thing and the right decisions in the municipality. We talked about repurposing space and the municipalities setting aside land and enablement for things like green initiatives and youth initiatives. We talked about not being an either or between solving problems with business or government, that we need to collaborate there. We did talk a lot about transparency and the importance of transparency and how decisions are made, and the ability for folks to ask questions and understand the details in that. We talked about being human-oriented and scaled, and the ability to move more quickly during COVID. That I need to read something from Don Shaw now. We talked about fun ideas for human-scaled things like parking day. And then we did emphasize that there were three of the final three of the resolutions, including sustainable housing, interaction between authorities, business, and the community, and the role of business to grow a caring community, that seemed to be of great interest to the folks in this session. So I'm going to leave my portion as facilitator just with a very exceptionally profound thank you to all the people who contributed, both in the chat, everyone who put their thoughts behind kicking us off as a speaker and a panelist. And I feel privileged to have been here with everyone today, and I have a few more names to add to my people I know list, which is always wonderful. So, Shoop, okay, Shoop, shop, Shoop. Did I get it right? Shoop, okay, thank you. And I don't know if anyone from the Urban Economy Forum was going to tell us what's happening next. Okay, so I'll just say that the next session then, I'm just going by the agenda. There's a break for 15 minutes till 3:15. So if you're not on Collingwood, Eastern, Central, whatever it is time, that's a 15-minute break. And there are two sessions starting at 3:15, one on realizing positive economic development, and I believe that was in this breakout room. And the second one, which is happening concurrently, is also at 3:15. It's session 3.2 on community engagement for sustainable development, and that's in the other room. So you can change your room on using the leave button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, everyone. We'll be sure to capture your inputs.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Excellent job.
Thank you.